Welcome back, everybody. In Module 6, we're going to look at 3 different chapters in our textbook. We are going to talk a little bit about printmaking just as a process and all the various ways that artists use printmaking to create artwork and to communicate a message to their audience. We're also going to talk about graphic arts in general. So that would include fields like graphic design or interactive design. We're going to get a general understanding of some of the types of things that fall under the category of graphic design, some of the tools that designers use, and some of the ways that graphic design shows up in our lives. Both graphic design and printmaking have shared relationships in some ways. And so we're going to make those comparisons and look at those relationships together. And each of them in turn will play a role in the final chapter that we'll be talking about, which is the chapter on modernism in your textbook. We'll see some of the ways that those technologies and the mediums and the materials relate to the artwork that was being made of the time. So just to kind of recap, we're going to approach 2 chapters that are specifically about processes and forms of art. And then we have another chapter where we're really looking at art in context, which is modernism. And we'll pick up where we left off in the last module when we were talking about post-impressionism and impressionism. And we'll see how modernism grows out of that. Okay. Printmaking describes processes for creating multiples. In 15th century Europe, the print medium arose as the primary means of communicating ideas quickly and effectively to a lot of different people. And printmakers like Albrecht Dürer and Rembrandt rose to great fame for their incredible skill in printmaking. I have some supplements for this module that are required for you to watch. Printmaking as a process is pretty labor intensive and it has a whole lot of steps involved in it. So I think that one of the best ways to learn about printmaking as a medium is to watch demonstrations of the various processes. So I just want to point out that there are short videos in the supplement section that are short demonstrations for each of the processes that we'll talk about. Is a visual medium after all. So a combination of seeing and hearing about these things, I think, is really helpful. We will also examine the disciplines that fall under the heading of design. In the previous module, you learned about Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, who bridged the gap between printmaking and design in his posters of the Parisian nightlife. So Toulouse-Lautrec's posters echoed influences of Japanese printmaking and also Art Nouveau designers. Toulouse-Lautrec and other designers employ art and technology to communicate ideas through the use of symbols, type, and or illustration. And this is some of the ways that it relates to graphic design. The chapters on printmaking and graphic design correspond to the beginnings of modernism, which is a period from about 1900 to 1913. And that's going to be our focus in the last part of Module 6, Chapter 22. You'll examine how artists were inspired by or reacted to revolutions that were happening in the culture in science, philosophy, and technology. The Fauvists and the Expressionists experimented with visual elements of color and freed color from form and its representative responsibility or its representational function in artwork. Picasso has an interest in African-American masks, and this inspired his Cubist tendencies. Braque's Cubist paintings were a product of systematic breaking down of real space in painting. The Futurists are another sort of group of artists who are making work in this era, in this period of time. They favored ideas that had to do with overthrow and war and anarchy, but other designers removed themselves from politics. So with these sections where we're looking at art in context, we're starting to understand how what's happening of the time period the art was being made is either reflected in the artwork or responded to or reacted to or commented on by artists or not dealt with at all. Okay, so art in context. Our objectives at the end of this chapter. Okay, so this is important. You want to be able to identify and explain processes of printmaking and design. So we're going to look at a few different processes, take notes about how they're different from each other. We want to be able to see what makes them different from each other and also understand how the steps and the materials are slightly different from each other. You want to also be able to sort of learn how to deeply look at various types of disciplines in printmaking and design. We're going to talk about current trends and also past trends in both of those fields. And then in the section on modernism, we're going to discuss a few different groups, all of which had specific interests in art making. So early 20th century movements such as Fauvism, Expressionism, Cubism, Futurism, and other modernist modes of abstraction. We're going to come up with sort of a visual idea of what each of those groups looks like, what they're interested in, and you want to be able to articulate how they're different from each other. So I will see you again in a few minutes.